A man walked in, his face mostly hidden behind a hat and sunglasses. He looked like any other customer, blending into the relaxed environment of the restaurant. No one paid much attention to him, including the waitress who was busy attending to tables. The waitress, a young woman named Emma, was new to the job. She was energetic, confident, and full of opinions, often sharing her thoughts with customers, sometimes a little too freely. As she approached the new customer, she had no idea that this was no ordinary man. In fact, this was Clint Eastwood, the famous actor and director, though Emma didn't recognize him at all. Emma handed Clint the menu, her expression a little impatient. "Can I get you something to drink, or do you need more time to decide?" she asked, her tone slightly curt. Clint, known for his calm demeanor, didn't seem bothered by her attitude. He simply smiled politely and asked for a glass of water, saying he needed a moment to look over the menu. Without realizing it, Emma was about to make a big mistake. She didn't know that the man sitting at her table was not only a world-famous actor, but also the owner of the very restaurant she was working at. Emma returned with Clint's glass of water, tapping her foot impatiently as she waited for him to place his order. "Are you ready yet? Or should I come back in another 10 minutes?" she asked with a hint of sarcasm, clearly not in the mood to wait. Clint, still maintaining his cool, glanced up from the menu and ordered a simple meal. "I'll have the steak medium rare with a side of vegetables," he said calmly, trying to keep the interaction pleasant. Emma scribbled down the order, but couldn't resist making a snide comment. "Stay up, ho? I hope you don't expect anything fancy. This isn't some five-star restaurant, you know," she said, rolling her eyes slightly. Clint chuckled softly, still not revealing who he was. "I'm sure it'll be just fine," he responded, his voice kind but firm. He had dealt with worse attitudes in Hollywood, but it was strange for him to encounter such rudeness in his own establishment. He decided to let it slide for the moment, curious to see how things would unfold. As Emma walked away, she muttered under her breath, unaware that Clint could hear her. "Ugh, old guys like him are always so picky. Bet he'll send the steak back 3 times. Clint raised an eyebrow at her comment, but remained seated, sipping his water. Little did Emma know, the man she had just insulted had the power to decide her future at the restaurant. The tension in the air was slowly building, and Clint was quietly observing everything. When the meal arrived, Emma placed a plate in front of Clint with a loud clatter. "There you go," she said, barely looking at him. Her impatience was starting to show even more now. "Hope it's to your liking, but don't be surprised if it's not as fancy as you're used to." Clint looked down at the perfectly cooked steak and smiled. He wasn't upset about the food. In fact, it looked delicious. But the waitress's attitude was becoming more difficult to ignore. Still, he remained calm and polite, cutting into the steak and taking a bite. It was exactly how he liked it, medium rare, tender, and flavorful. Emma stood nearby, arms crossed, as if waiting for a complaint. "Well, is it good enough for you, or should I go tell the kitchen you want something else?" Clint wiped his mouth with a napkin and nodded. "It's great," he said, his voice steady. "You've got a good team in the kitchen." Emma seemed slightly taken aback by his compliment, but she didn't let it show. "Yeah, well, don't get too used to it. We're not exactly Michelin-starred around here," she replied, her tone still sharp. Clint could feel the tension rising, but he remained patient. There was something almost amusing about the situation. Here was this waitress, completely unaware that she was speaking to the owner of the restaurant in such a disrespectful manner. He wondered how long it would take for her to realize her mistake. After finishing his meal, Clint signaled Emma for the check. As she approached the table, she sighed loudly, clearly annoyed by what she considered to be a bothersome customer. "Finally ready to leave?" she asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Clint smiled again, his patience wearing thin but his calm demeanor still intact. "Yes, I think I'll be heading out now," he said, handing her his credit card. As she processed the payment, Emma couldn't resist one final jab. "You know, you could have at least left a decent tip for the kitchen staff." They worked hard to make sure your steak was up to your high standards, she said, rolling her eyes once more. Clint paused for a moment, then gave her a serious look. You're right, he said, standing up slowly. I'll make sure they're properly taken care of. Emma didn't catch the meaning behind his words. She simply shrugged, assuming he was just another difficult customer. She handed him his receipt without a word of thanks and turned her back, eager to get back to her other tables. But Clint had one last card to play, and it was going to change everything. As Clint prepared to leave, he decided it was time to let Emma in on a little secret. He walked over to the restaurant's manager, who was standing nearby, observing the interaction with a nervous expression. Clint whispered something to him, and the manager's eyes widened in surprise. The manager quickly walked over to Emma, who was busy clearing a table. Emma, he said in a low voice, I need to speak with you for a moment. Emma turned around, clearly irritated. What now? She muttered under her breath, following the manager to the side of the restaurant where Clint was waiting. The manager took a deep breath before speaking. Emma, I think there's something you should know, he said, glancing at Clint. This gentleman here. He owns the restaurant. Emma's face went pale. She looked at Clint, her eyes wide with shock. What? She stammered, unable to process what she had just heard. He owns the place. Clint nodded, his expression calm but firm. That's right, he said. I'm Clint Eastwood, and this is my restaurant. Emma was frozen in place, her mind racing. How could she have been so rude to him? She had no idea she had been insulting the owner of the restaurant the entire time. Panic started to set in as she realized the gravity of her mistake. I am so sorry, Emma stammered, her voice shaky. I didn't know. I had no idea. Clint looked at her for a moment before speaking. You didn't know, but that doesn't excuse the way you treated me, he said calmly. It's important to treat every customer with respect, no matter who they are. Emma nodded quickly, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm really sorry, Mr. Eastwood. I'll do better, I promise. Please don't fire me. Clint sighed, considering her words. I'm not going to fire you, he said after a long pause. But I want you to learn something from this. Treat everyone with respect, whether they're the owner, a regular customer, or someone just passing through. You never know who you might be talking to. Emma was relieved that she still had her job, but the embarrassment of the situation stayed with her. She had learned a valuable lesson that day, one that she would never forget. From that moment on, she made a conscious effort to treat every customer with kindness and respect, no matter how they looked or who they might be. As for Clint, he quietly left the restaurant, satisfied that his message had been delivered. He knew that he could have handled the situation differently, but he wanted Emma to learn from her mistake in a way that would have a lasting impact. And so, the story of the waitress who insulted Clint Eastwood became a powerful reminder to always treat others with respect, because you never know who might be sitting at your table. As the days passed, the story of Emma's encounter with Clint Eastwood spread around the restaurant and even into the town. Her co-workers couldn't stop talking about it, teasing her lightly but also acknowledging the lessons she had learned. Emma became known as the waitress who had insulted the restaurant's owner without knowing it, and yet, in a strange twist of fate, she had been given a second chance. Emma, however, wasn't as light-hearted about the incident. Every night after her shifts, she would replay the moment in her mind. The look on Clint's face when he revealed who he was, the way her stomach had dropped in sheer panic when the manager had told her the truth. It wasn't just about the embarrassment. It was about the realization that she had been treating people unfairly without even noticing. She remembered the way she had spoken to Clint that day, her impatience, her sarcasm, and the assumption that he was just another difficult customer. It made her feel ashamed. What if she had treated him with kindness and respect from the beginning? What if she had taken the time to be patient, to offer a smile instead of an eye roll? The outcome could have been so different. But Emma was determined not to let the past hold her back. She knew she couldn't change what had happened, but she could change how she treated people going forward. Each day, she greeted customers with a genuine smile, making an effort to be patient, even on the busiest of days. She listened to their requests, took the time to engage in small talk, and treated everyone with the same level of respect, regardless of how they dressed or how they acted. Months went by, and Emma had settled into her role as a better, more respectful waitress. She had grown to love her job and the people she interacted with on a daily basis. But there was always a small part of her that wondered if Clint Eastwood would ever return to the restaurant. And then, one day, he did. It was a quiet afternoon, much like the day of their first encounter. Emma was in the middle of serving another table when she saw him walk in. Her heart skipped a beat, but this time, she wasn't filled with panic. Instead, she felt a sense of calm. She knew she had changed, and she was ready to prove it. Clint took a seat at the same table where he had sat before, and Emma walked over with a smile. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice friendly and warm. "It's nice to see you again, Mr. Eastwood. Can I get you started with some water?" Clint looked up at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "It's good to see you too, Emma," he replied, recognizing the change in her demeanor immediately. "Water sounds perfect." As Emma brought Clint his water, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had come a long way since their last encounter, and she knew Clint could see that. They exchanged a few words, and for the first time, Emma felt comfortable speaking to him, not as a celebrity, but as a regular customer. Throughout the meal, Clint and Emma exchanged small talk. This time, there were no snide remarks, no sarcasm, and no impatience. Instead, Emma treated Clint like any other customer, offering a warm smile and polite conversation. Clint, in turn, was gracious and kind, appreciating the difference in her attitude. As the meal came to an end, Clint left a generous tip on the table and stood up to leave. Before he walked out the door, he turned back to Emma and gave her a nod. "You've done well, Emma," he said, his voice full of approval. "Keep it up." Emma's heart swelled with pride. Coming from Clint Eastwood, those words meant the world to her. She smiled and thanked him, watching as he walked out of the restaurant and into the California sun. For Emma, that moment was a turning point. It wasn't just about the fact that Clint Eastwood had forgiven her or that he had given her a second chance. It was about the fact that she had learned to see people differently. She had learned to treat everyone with respect, regardless of who they were or what they looked like. And in doing so, she had not only kept her job, but she had also become a better person. In the months that followed, Emma's life continued to improve. Her relationships with her co-workers became stronger, and she gained the respect of both the staff and the customers at the restaurant. Word of her encounter with Clint Eastwood had spread far and wide. But instead of being known for insulting the owner, she became known for the lessons she had learned and the growth she had shown. Emma began to take on more responsibilities at the restaurant, and eventually, the manager offered her a promotion. She was now in charge of training new staff, teaching them the importance of respect and kindness toward all customers. It was a role she took seriously, knowing firsthand how a single mistake could change everything. One day, while training a new waitress, Emma found herself repeating the very lesson she had learned from Clint. "You never know who you might be serving," she said with a smile. "Treat everyone with respect, because you never know who they really are or what they've been through." The new waitress nodded, clearly taking Emma's words to heart. Emma watched her go back to work, feeling a sense of pride. She had come a long way since that fateful day when she had insulted Clint Eastwood. She had grown, learned, and become a better person. And in the end, that was the real lesson of the story. Years later, Emma would look back on that day as a pivotal moment in her life. It wasn't just the fact that she had unknowingly insulted Clint Eastwood that stuck with her. It was a lesson she had learned about humility, respect, and kindness. The restaurant continued to thrive, with Clint occasionally dropping in for a meal. Each time he did, Emma made sure to greet him with the same warm smile and respect she now gave to every customer. She knew that it didn't matter whether a person was famous or unknown, rich or poor. Everyone deserved to be treated with dignity. And as for Clint, he continued to visit the restaurant quietly, enjoying the food and the atmosphere. He never brought up that day again, but Emma knew that he had seen her growth, and that was enough. In the end, the story of the waitress who insulted Clint Eastwood wasn't just about a simple mistake. It was about the power of second chances, the importance of learning from our mistakes, and the value of treating others with kindness. It was a lesson that Emma would carry with her for the rest of her life, and one that she would pass on to others, ensuring that the lesson endured long after that fateful day. Years later, Emma was still working at the restaurant, but now in a managerial role. The restaurant had become even more successful, and Emma was known for her exceptional service and dedication to her job. The story of her encounter with Clint Eastwood had become something of a local legend, and people would often come in, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous actor. One day, a young man walked into the restaurant, looking nervous and unsure of himself. Emma noticed him immediately and approached with a warm smile. "Welcome. Can I help you find a seat?" she asked kindly. The young man looked up, surprised by her friendly demeanor. Yes, please," he stammered. "I've never been here before." Emma led him to a table and handed him a menu. As she walked away, she couldn't help but smile. She had come full circle. Years ago, she had been in a similar position, unsure of herself, making mistakes and learning the hard way. But now, she was the one offering guidance and kindness to others. And as she continued to serve her customers, Emma knew one thing for sure. No matter who walked through the door, they would be treated with the respect and kindness they deserved. After all, you never know who might be sitting at your table.